And today we're speaking with Melissa D'Ellena in studio from D'Ellena Law Office, and we're going to talk about the home buying process.
Good morning, Mary. Good morning to our listeners. Thanks for having me back on. Always exciting to be here. So we are talking about purchasing your first home. And I'm sure you can remember when you bought your first home, it's a really scary process. And in large part, it's because you're learning a whole new language.
Absolutely.
Many home buyers don't know what an escrow is. They don't know what real estate taxes impact. They don't understand the mortgage process. So having the right team of professionals, and I feel like we say that every week, but it really is critical to making certain that you're going to have a smooth transaction because there's so many people that touch the purchase process.
Well, I found that, sellers have their own set of interests specific to them, and buyers have their own set of interests specific to them, and having adequate representation, for each person is very important, and making sure that everybody's talking, because not everybody has the same goal is to sell a property and buy a property, but people need to protect, the financial aspects and insurance aspects of that too.
100%. I mean,
and legal.
Certainly you have an aligned interest. Sellers want to sell, buyers want to buy, but sellers usually think their house is worth more. Buyers think the house is worth less. Then you have inspection issues. So there's always going to be an opportunity where having the right professionals to protect you really does become critical. And I think whether you're buying or selling, starting with a realtor is really the first step.
Absolutely.
And making sure that realtor has the right team of people behind them for your client needs, whether you are buying or selling.
And then really reviewing that purchase and sales agreement and any contingencies and things that you want specified in it. It needs to be clearly spelled out in writing before it is signed and submitted. Because that's what you're going to live and die by.
Yep. So as a first-time home buyer, finding your right dream house through your realtor is a great first step. But you have to make sure you can afford it. Right. So you also have to be talking very openly with a lender who can identify how much house that you can afford.
And with new trade guidelines, if you have not purchased a mortgage in the last 24 months, I would say, even 12 months, it's a totally different country now doing lending, completely different rules. And you think that you're qualified, and the bank is going to tell you you're not.
There's a lot of conservative approach to the financing now. So the underwriting guidelines, which is what we're referring to for buyers, whether you're a first-time home buyer or a subsequent buyer, they're going to look really closely at your debt ratios, at your income ratios. And I wish we had a mortgage person here because this would be a great segue for them to talk about that. But that's why talking to a lender at the very onset to make sure your tax returns are in good shape, your credit is in good order so that you know whether or not you can actually afford that dream house once you find it. Because sometimes you may have to take some reparative action.
Well, especially this time of year, I'll tell our listeners as a financial planner, and I've been on the show when Matt Bates has been here or John Castori, both of them are contributors and loan officers, is they will always tell you, please call me first before you do anything, including filing your tax return. It's tax season, everybody. If you're thinking about refinancing or buying a home, do not file that tax return until you have spoke with a loan officer, because they know how that's supposed to be presented to an underwriter, and what you think you're doing, your CPA is going to try to get you the most deductions to get you the highest return. That might not help you in a scenario. So is it worth getting back an extra $500 and it disqualifies you for a mortgage? Probably not when it's your dream home.
And it is such a critical time because, like you said, we're right on the cusp of filing.
Essence, yes. Yeah.
So, once you've found that house and you've been pre-approved, what the next steps are, again, is kind of this black hole of this new language that buyers are learning if this is the first time they're at the go-round. So it's typical that there will be negotiations between buyers and sellers, especially in this particular market. And once there's a meeting of the minds, then a contract has to be drawn up. And generally in Rhode Island, the purchase and sales is drafted by real estate agents. But as you had alluded to before, there's a lot of contingencies and a lot of rights and obligations that are mentioned, and that is the Bible of your transaction. So as a buyer and or as a seller, you really have to fully understand and appreciate what those terms are. And my position as an attorney is that I can help you to understand what that is. So hiring a real estate attorney at the onset of your real estate transaction for your closing and your title services and asking them to review your purchase and sales is a really smart way to buy.
So once the purchase and sales agreement is drafted, and you have to remember, once you sign it, you can't go back and add to it. Nobody's going to allow you to put, oh, but wait, there's
Right.
more. You have to get it done first. After we get the purchase and sales, then what happens?
So typically at that point, the buyer has the right to have a home inspection because Rhode Island state law does allow for that. This is basically your opportunity to test drive the house, make sure that there's no problems. And at that point, if there are any issues, the buyer has the right to negotiate for home inspection repairs, credits, or just back out of the deal if absolutely necessary. So while that is happening, the buyer's lender, because remember, we've done this with the mortgage company, has presumably ordered for the title search to be done, which is to confirm that the property is free and clear of all title defects. So a closing or title attorney like ourselves would be working on that simultaneously with the inspections.
And things like title defects that might come up would be, throw a couple examples out there.
Oh, you could have old, open, undischarged mortgages. You could have people that think they own the house, but they don't because there's been a death and there was no
They
survivorship.
didn't update the paperwork through probate court, which means you're going to take give yourself an extra 90 days to get through that because
Minimum.
of advertising and time and court process.
Yeah, I mean, you name it, and we can identify what the problems have been. But there's also always an opportunity to resolve a title defect. Sometimes it can take longer, but knowing what those title defects are up front, working with the seller and or their counsel to resolve those is what we do.
It's important to set expectations because people tend to get really emotional about and excited, and there's very tight time frames, especially if you're moving out of one property and into another, and the moving truck is like waiting in the driveway with the engine idling to get you from the closing table moved in, and stress and emotion runs very high at that moment. And so it's important to set expectations that there might be some unknowns within an inspection or within a title search that could delay the process. So you have to be really flexible. And that's, when you're selling another property contingent upon finding suitable housing and getting all of that lined up, it's very important to have advocates for you, your realtor and a real estate attorney looking out to foresee the problems that you might not.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I tell all of my clients buying and selling a house at the same time is probably one of the single most stressful things that you will go
Absolutely.
through because you're going to feel displaced. You're going to feel anxious and stressed about, well, what happens if all of these things don't go off exactly without a hitch? And more often than not, you do find a hiccup along the way, which is why
there's
being
always a
flexible is
hiccup.
important.
Yeah, yep.
So, and also simultaneous with examining the title and clearing the title is the appraisal. So the lender has ordered for an independent appraiser to go out and verify that the property is worth what we as the prospective buyers are planning to pay for it. So that process is happening while the inspections are going on and while the lender is underwriting the loan. So getting back to the points that we had made early on, making sure that the buyer's financials are in good order and are ready to go.
Excellent.
And then once that happens, then we have the clear to close. And that's really your magic language to say, okay, we can have a transaction.
And I would also throw in unique situations like log cabins, waterfront properties, things like that. Insurance can also throw you for a loop. There's insurance premiums have gone up across the board nationwide on home and auto. And, many carriers are unwilling to take on certain types of risks, Rhode Island being a huge concern for flooding during hurricane season, et cetera. That's something to investigate up front so that the amount of insurance you might have to pay can also affect how much you're going to be loaned.
I actually just was going to mention that home insurance does have to be secured by the buyer before we can have that clear to close.
And it's better to know in advance exactly how much, because it seems like even loan officers lately are surprised at how much the premiums
They
actually
have gone
are.
up.
Yeah,
Yep,
a lot.
tremendously.
A lot. So, all right, Melissa, thank you so much. So if you have, if you're considering buying a home or selling a home, and you really should give Melissa a call. You can reach her at 401-885-3800. We're with Melissa D'Ellena from D'Ellena Law.